Without further ado, I want to invite Gordon. He is our school director and an amazing speaker. Why don't we welcome him to the front and just pray for him as well. Why don't we stand up for a minute, stretch our hands towards Gordon. Father, would you fill Gordon up right now? Thank you that you will speak to us through him. We just want more and give him more in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thanks, Joseph. Wow. I love taking Lord's Supper tonight. I was saying to Joseph earlier that when I was a pastor a number of years ago, sometimes pastors get overworked. It's hard to believe, isn't it, since they only work on Sundays, but so it turned out every Sunday night I usually had to preach song lead, a cappella, with the, and also do the Lord's Supper for the people who were there. And there were many weeks where I was just coming to the service being like, okay, God, I don't really know what I'm supposed to be saying tonight, but because I was so busy getting everything else ready, but he was always quite faithful. But I've just over the last couple of years really begun to enjoy and I don't know quite how to explain this, but I come with an expectation now that when the Lord's Supper communion is being taken, that I'm going to meet God in some way, and tonight was not an exception. It was really, I could just really feel His presence. So I'm really glad, I was going to say, just really glad to see you, but I can only see some of you. I came here tonight at 7, just before 7, thinking, yes, it's at 7. It starts at 7. And there were 6 people here, and I thought, wow, this is, yeah, okay. Things have gone down a bit. So, and then when the band was still practicing at 10 after, I was like, what's happening here? Oh, okay, we don't start till 7:30. When I was 12, my father, in an act of, as part of a series of acts to get me to kind of grow up, sent me to Vancouver, to a ski camp, a summer ski camp. So it was in Whistler at the top. Yeah, Mel, you're like, what? I was 12 though, Mel. So yeah, she's a ski instructor, so she's like, yeah, I'm all about that. So I'm 12, and I've never been on a plane. I'm very shy, and he said there's another out of all the sort of teenage boys going, they're all older. I'm the second youngest. He said there's a 14-year-old going that I know. His name is David Wilson, and he, I guess, is supposed to keep an eye on me. And I kind of meet once this other young boy. He's 12. He's like a couple months younger than me. And so we fly my first plane flight, and I get to Vancouver, and it's all a blur, of course. And of course, all the other Toronto teenagers, 18, 17, 18-year-olds want to go out on the streets, and I think we're kind of in not a good area, but we do, and I survived that, and then we take the bus up to Whistler. It's summer, so of course there's not really any skiing going on, and then we, take the lifts up to the top, so up to this place called the Roundhouse, and it's, I'm in a world that I've never experienced before, and I'm 12, so I'm already, feeling homesick. And they put me in a it's not really a cabin, it's like a frame with a canvas, sides and roof, so it's not very homey, and bunks, and here I am with all these older, boisterous teenage boys. There's multiple, so I'm not even with anybody I know, and then there's the whole, you're 12 and you have to get undressed, and the older guys, and it's kind of awkward. So every day then starts like this. We get up at 5:30. It's dark. Have breakfast. Then we get in our ski equipment, and we walk. Now we march up the mountain, into the snow, up to the glacier, And we spend the day up there, and it's always, it's always sunny at the top. We do work. We have to, dig the ski lift in. It's like a portable thing, and we practice and get lessons and all day, and then we have to come back down. So you're exhausted by the end of the day. And near the end of the first week, David, the one who's older than me, the sort of guy I look up to, I remember he's coming down and he catches a tip of his ski. And unlike now, in those days you had straps that kept your ski from going everywhere. And his popped off and then spun around before it broke and caught him across here. And he cut a major artery, and I remember that he just grabs it like this, but the blood, it's not dribbling or pouring, it is spurting out. And I remember these very athletic ski instructors, I think some of them on the national team are just like driving themselves up the mountain to get to him. And we're all kind of like, what's going on here? And they get a helicopter and they take him down, and for several days they don't know if he's going to live. Just like, what's happening? Strangely enough, I get the flu the next day. I think it's the flu, but really I'm just in shock, I think. A couple days after this, the other kid, the kid who's the youngest in the camp, the only one I know, we're kind of running down, we're down below the glacier, we're running down, and he falls. And he cuts his leg, he cuts his knee open, and they have to take him down, and I never see him again. So this is going well, you can tell. I have no idea about anything. I don't know where I'm going, what I'm supposed to be doing, how I'm going to get home. I don't even know where my ticket is, now that I think about it. Obviously, my dad's probably on the phone to them telling, make sure I get home. So I do get home. 2 weeks later, I come home. And as I come home, I don't feel like I did when I left. I feel like I'm somebody else, like I've changed in some way. And my parents are so taken aback by this that they comment on it. And I actually feel like that never really left me. Having that kind of experience, which is probably exactly what maybe not exactly, but my father didn't plan for it to be that way, but that was his plan, was to get me out of what was normal, to try and get me to be somebody other than who I'd been up to that point. I was, like I said, pretty shy, still kind of am. Which brings me to what I want to talk about tonight, which is the undiscovered country. Going to the undiscovered country. God uses the undiscovered country to maximize us to our growth. One of the ways that he gets us to grow in our walk is not just through prayer and worship and all of those kinds of things that are necessary and fabulous, but he wants to take us to a place we've never been before. Sometimes he does it by invitation. That's always the nicest way. But sometimes he does it by shoving us or pulling us into that place. Now, what is the undiscovered country? It's essentially the place you've never been before. Whether it's physically, psychologically, emotionally, spiritually, the place that God has for you to grow and wants to take you there. By the way, the title comes from, of course, actually I was praying about it, and I actually had a picture, and that was the phrase that came to me, the undiscovered country. The undiscovered country is a place that God's inviting you to. So it can be a real place, like a country, a position or a job, any kind of change, actually a significant change, a new course of action, a new way of thinking about things or people, a position or place in your heart that God wants to get at. It's anything new that he's calling you to in a significant way, a place that you haven't been to before. And he uses this, as I said, to get us, to get some growth happening in us in a new way. There's, how many of you remember the movie Star Trek for the Undiscovered Country? I'm sorry, I have to mention this if we're going to use this title. Of course, they stole it from Shakespeare, but in the movie, you have this race they're called the Klingons. You all know about the Klingons, right? Kaplach. Okay. Yeah, sorry about that. Leaking Star Trekkerisms there. So the Klingons are opposed and have been for generations to the human sort of civilizations, but their home planet explodes and they have nowhere to go. So the plan that's devised is they have to travel through human space essentially to their home planet, to a new planet. But of course, what happens is that the people who everybody's suspicious of everybody else. Why? Because that's the mindset. This is the way it's always been. You can't trust them. And so people begin to work to make the whole thing fail because they can't adjust to the new thing. And at the bottom line, what is it that makes this happen? It's fear. Fear is the thing that stops us most often from going to the undiscovered country. God calls us, he invites us, he says, hey, I want you to do this thing, I want you to come to this place with me, and we do this. Why? Because we're afraid. We don't really want to hear him about that. And fear robs us. It robs us of this opportunity. Genesis 12 is the obvious, I think, text that kind of goes along with this. If you remember at the beginning of Genesis 12, it's the story of Abraham. And I think it's significant if you think about the book, and we just studied the book of Genesis, didn't we, this last week? Is it? Oh, you weren't in there, that's right. Yeah, he skipped out. No, he's no longer an advanced student. He's now an intern. He has graduated. But we were studying Genesis, and the first 11 chapters, you see people like Abraham, or not Abraham, but Noah and Adam and Eve and Cain, but they're kind of sketches. And the first person that you begin to run into who is more than a sketch, whose life seems a little bit more like a real person, I'm not saying they're not real, but it seems more real, more full, is Abraham. And one of the first things that God says is to leave. Leave what you know. Leave your country, your people, your father's household, and go to the land that I'll show you. That's a huge deal. It's a huge deal. Especially in cultures where people are very closely knit together and your identity has to do with your family and your clan and all of those kinds of things. It's massive. And he says, okay, I want you to leave them all. Yeah, you have your immediate family, but I want you to leave everything else. And I'm not even telling you actually where you're going. I want you to go to the place I'm going to show you. So get in your car, turn the GPS on, but you can only have it to the little, like I can see one street ahead. And you'll know when you get there. I don't like that very much. Turn right, turn left, turn right. Everything that he has as identity and security, he has to kind of jettison that in order to follow God in this new place, the unknown country. He didn't really know about it, and it wasn't all easy, was it? You think about the things that Abraham went through. He got in trouble with people trying to steal his wife. That probably was a pretty normal thing, actually. Kings could take anybody they wanted. And he knew his wife was beautiful enough even at that age that, this was a risk. And people tried to do that. He had to go to war to rescue a relative. He was tempted with great wealth by a sleazy politician. He nearly had to sacrifice his own son. It doesn't get much more difficult than that. And he had conflict in his own home. Most of us don't have two wives or servants or whatever, so we don't have to worry about that. And he had sex with an Egyptian. It wasn't so easy. Sorry about that. But he got rich. Wow, that's not so bad. He met kings. He met Melchizedek, which I would have that on my bucket list. He fed angels. He had lunch with God. What do you feed God, by the way? Think about that. You can't just make craft dinner. God's coming. Oh, get the craft dinner out. He had open visions and dreams. He nearly rescued a whole city. Actually, 2 cities, really. He became a hero. He had the impossible child, and he gained more faith. The thing is that along this path, there's this process. He moves to the country, and God keeps setting things before him. And as he does that, God makes the promises deeper and wider. And so much so that he himself is changed. His name was Abram before and becomes Abraham. It's not just kind of like, oh, I think I'll change your name. No, something's changed in him. His potential has become more full. You could say his destiny has become more realized. Because that's what happens when we go to the undiscovered country with God. We have this opportunity then to grow in ways that we would never grow normally. And in fact, the world wouldn't be the same. God says this, I'll make you into a great nation, and I'll bless you. I'll make your name great. I'll make you famous, and you'll be a blessing. I'll bless those who bless you. So the people that are on your side, it's going to go well with them. And the people who are not on your side, it's not going to go well with them because I'll be against them. And all the peoples on earth will be blessed through you. That's a pretty tall order, isn't it? I don't think the same promise is made for us, but when you step into the undiscovered country, something happens. Something significant happens when you take that step. If you think about the 3 major patriarchs in the book of Genesis, so you have Abraham, Jacob, and Joseph. Isaac only has a little cameo, hey, and then he's gone. But all of them take significant journeys, physically and emotionally. Abraham, of course, comes from that place, and it becomes his place in a way. And his name changes. Jacob, on the other hand, he has to leave home, and he goes back to the old country for 20 years. And it's not a very easy ride for him. For 20 years, he lives somewhere else. And there's this great cycle in there of growth. At the beginning, he's just a manipulator. And he has this encounter with God, and he says that this is a strange promise. If you'll take care of me and bring me back here and everything's good, then you can be my God. Talk about, making deals with God. Then you can be my God. And after 20 years, he comes home and he has to face his brother, who the last time he saw was going to murder him. And he passes that test. And within a very short amount of time, he's telling his family, get rid of the household gods. Just get rid of them. He's come full circle now. He's given his full allegiance to God. And of course, he also has a name change because he's become someone different. He's no longer the same person that he was. In the story of Joseph, of course, that happens. I guess most of us would think he's kind of a snotty-nosed little dreamer. About 17 when he's packed off to Egypt, and it's not what he wants to do. And it's traumatic. As you read on, you can, the brothers recount what this was like. Basically how we ignored him when he was begging us not to do this. And about, again, 20 years later, he's 37 when he encounters his brothers again, and he's angry. He's angry, but he forgives them. It's a huge order. 20 years he's been ripped away from his home, living in this foreign country, been through all kinds of things. And he's never really resolved the issue of his brothers betraying him like that. and he forgives them. He has a huge, unbelievable amount of grace to forgive them. They're all shaking in their boots, even when their father dies. But he clearly has forgiven them. He's a great embodiment of mercy and grace. So he's made this massive change in going to the undiscovered country. Change that he didn't have to make, but he did. And this happens with each one of the patriarchs. This going to the far country. Some of you know my story, but a couple decades ago, I had this very nice job. I was a pastor in a church, and I lived in the church house. I'd had my own house, but I lived in the church house, and I had a nice car, and I got paid enough so that we had money to put in the bank. Good chunk went into the bank every year. And along the way, God sabotaged things, as he does, And he did it in the kindest way. It was kind of like he didn't really tell us what it was going to be like, but, he began to kind of inject some ideas about encountering him and about him being active, more active than the church I was in believed. And unfortunately, I came to believe some things that the church as a whole didn't really believe. And I tried not to, make things blow up into a million pieces, because that's not really helpful. But it was uncomfortable. So Kathy and I, we're on the same page. We're on the same page. We're on the same journey with God, and it's just really exciting. Actually, we came here once in the middle of it. I think we hid our car somewhere because we were afraid that people at our church would find out. So, that was a bit weird. We sat back over there, and anyway, that's a whole other story. But God said, okay, he said to me, go back to school. I'm like, oh, great. So that was a perfect way of kind of exiting where we were without, making anybody really, really upset with us. And so we moved. We moved to Texas. And this is great. I'm going back to school. But there were some other parts to it that weren't really that comfortable. Like, I'm 35. I know I only look 25 now, but I was 35 then. I'm 35. Because I'm a foreign student, I can only get a job on campus. I'm working at the library, which I love because I love books. But I'm doing the job that an 18-year-old is doing. And I'm not making very much money at all, like hardly anything. And on top of it, I'm the one who's been trained as a pastor, but the church that we're at, they love Kathy. They just merely like me. So the person that gets to speak is not me, it's Kathy. And the person that they glorify all the time is Kathy. It's not me. And it's not easy. And there's a whole bunch of other things that happened. And in the end, the church that we had to shut it down. And because that wasn't there, we had to come home. We had to come back to Canada. We had no church, couldn't go back to the same denomination, didn't have a clue what we were doing. Got home, actually, and my van blew up. The engine blew up. Don't have any money, of course. I get pneumonia, like serious pneumonia. Some other things happened on top of that. And it's like, what's going on? And the prophetic word that we get is, well, where you end up is where you're supposed to be. Oh, thanks a lot! And where we end up is right here. And within 8 months of being here, within a year, we're working in the School of Ministry, which has kind of been a dream for me. But the journey was both wonderful and also difficult at the same time. And neither of us are the same people that we were when we went. It's that invitation. Are you going to take the invitation that God has or not? You're going to take the invitation to go to the undiscovered country. Sometimes when I'm driving, especially in the wintertime, or especially up north on the highway, I have this thought. It's a recurring thought. Why in God's name did anyone ever leave their home country to come here and to settle? I mean, are they stupid? Just think about that sometimes. If you drive on the 401 in the winter and you look outside the window of your car, not just on the road, but look outside, you'll think the same thing. Like, what were they thinking? I mean, it wasn't like you could Google, what's the average winter temperature in Canada? -20. No, I'm not going. They didn't do that. They couldn't do that. They just thought, here's an opportunity for something different for me. Maybe an opportunity for, land or growth or family or something. And then they get in the ship, in the bottom of the ship, puking their guts out for several weeks, and arriving in this place. Nobody's waiting for them. Nobody's giving them directions. They just have to get off and do something. Make a life. That's risky, isn't it? I was like traveling when I go and someone picks me up at the airport, they take me out to dinner, and they have a nice bed or hotel for me. That's the way I like to travel. Not in the bottom of a ship. But that's what they did. They knew that there was something that was going to be beneficial for them, hopefully, and they risked to do it. A while ago, this woman asked me, did we do the right thing? It was this kind of little plaintive cry. Did we do the right thing? Basically, she and her husband, they had given up their jobs and their home and moved everything to be here. And basically on this premise, we just felt like God said we were supposed to. No audible voice, no vision, do this. They just had this feeling like God maybe had something. And of course my answer was yes. Yeah, you did the right thing. Easy for me. I didn't do that. You did that. But I said yes because you're wanting something more. You're wanting growth for you and your family. It was about growth. It wasn't necessarily about obedience. One of the things that I was thinking about this tonight, just kind of an addendum here, but Abraham left what he had, and he went to a place it wasn't his. And he moved around in this place. And near the end of the story of Abraham, his wife dies. And he has this, it feels very poignant to me, interaction with his neighbors, buying some land. And this kind of the first concrete touch, that he actually gets this piece of land. And the outcome of that is that generations after, it becomes their inheritance. And in fact, if you think about it today, 3,000, 4,000 years later, it's still their inheritance. They're still living in that land. And it was all because Abraham accepted the invitation to go to the undiscovered country. And it occurred to me that when we do this, not only is the growth something that happens in us, but that's, to use our language, inheritance. Because it becomes us, part of us, it therefore becomes part of our family, part of their inheritance. What we gain, they gain through us. If you think about it, this would just be a quick example, but if you risk in order to encounter the love of God, and you encounter the love of God, and that changes you, it changes everything around you. And especially it changes your family. And they have something then that they've never had before. And they have access to something that they've never had before, which is the love of God, which is a changed parent, for instance. So when you go to the undiscovered country, not only do you grow, but there becomes an inheritance that's possible for your children and their children, etc., to pick up and to inherit. To bring it more closely at home, some of you know I started going back to university, started 2 years ago, which at my age, 25, it wasn't my age that kind of bothered me. I think it was, can I really do this? I don't know, and more, I kind of don't know what I'm doing. And I distinctly, especially for the first little while, I had a high level of anxiety because I didn't look like, how are my classes? They're not going to work. They just weren't working. And I didn't know where I was going, didn't know how things worked, having to meet lots of, not lots, but some new people, etc. And it was just, I just had this high level of anxiety about it. And it kind of culminated in had a final paper to do and misjudged the time frame. Forgot that, oh, hey, actually you're working for much of that time you think you're going to be studying. And had closest thing, I wouldn't say it was a panic attack, but I was like, I can't do this. And God really was using this to address some issues, taking me to a new place that I had not any experience in order to get to some of those things. And it was actually quite helpful after a while. I started to realize why I feel the way that I do about some things, the anxiety bits. And it's really been helpful. Now, he's still on me about some other things. The journey's not over. And the other day I was just thinking, actually, I can see you're trying to get at this thing here. I know what you're trying to do, but I'm ignoring you right now. Not quite ready to deal with that yet. But that's what happens. You go to the undiscovered country, it's a chance for God to bring you growth, and for you to become somebody different than you are, to realize your full potential. Not every undiscovered country, as I said, is a place on the map. Doesn't always demand physical relocation. How many of you have had physical relocation that felt like, yeah, this is the undiscovered country? Yeah. Kind of good, kind of not good, isn't it? Yeah. This is big adjustments. This is that place that you've never gone before. And it's a future that you can't really see. You can't necessarily see your way beyond it, but God can see it. I think what makes it bearable is that you don't go by yourself, right? I mean, that's the part that makes it work, is that you don't go by yourself. Remember that God said, go to the land I'll show you. And God is there. So wherever we go, and especially when we go to the place he's inviting us to, he goes with us. And therefore he makes it work. Makes it work for us. We don't have to go there just by ourselves. Not like he sort of sends us off you go, okay, that's it. Send me a postcard. God really doesn't do postcards that well. And that's what makes it bearable. He shows it to us and he takes us there. Deuteronomy 31:8 underlines this. It says this, the Lord is the one who goes ahead of you. The Lord is the one who goes ahead of you. He will be with you. He will not fail you nor forsake you. Do not fear or be dismayed. That comes right into that very thing we were talking about fear, how fear keeps us from going to that place, doesn't it? He tells us right up front, I'm going to go ahead of you. You don't have to be afraid. Don't be dismayed. How many of you feel like yeah, God's calling me to go someplace, and I've maybe been ignoring him a bit or something. A couple of you. How many of you would like to have some massive growth? Yeah, this is a trick question, right? If I say yes, that's really going to hurt. Maybe not as much as you think. If you're like me, you're a little bit like a hobbit. My feet aren't that hairy, but you don't really want to. How many of you love adventures? Okay, stop that. I don't love adventures. I love adventures when they're over. I don't love adventures in the middle. But yeah, going to the undiscovered country is an adventure. And God goes with us in the adventure, which makes it worthwhile. So why don't you just go ahead and stand up? The band, you can come on back up if you wish. Or I wish you would come. And if you'd hurry up too, that would be great. I'm just kidding. Jonathan is my friend, so I can bug him. The undiscovered country. I don't know that God ever stops wanting to take us to that place. I don't think however old we are, he's like, okay, you're too old for that. I'm probably not too young for that either. And I think he has that invitation for many of you at this moment, if not soon. I want you to just close your eyes for a minute. I want you to just ask him, God, what are you calling me to? God, what are you calling me to? What is the undiscovered country you're calling me to? Dramatically, it could be something like quitting your job, moving countries. Get a second opinion before you do that. Could be changing church from the place that you've been, starting a new business, coming to the school of ministry. Might be giving up Facebook or Twitter. Maybe it's fully facing something you don't want to face. And maybe some of you have just had your fingers in your spiritual ears and not wanting to listen to him. You kind of know he's asking you something, but you don't really want to face it. And if that's you, then just tell him, Lord, I'm sorry about that. But I choose to trust you to go to that next place. And if you feel uncertain about it, why don't you just give him now any of that fear, any of that uncertainty, any loss, and just say yes. Lord, now will you give us a word, a picture, a sense of where you want to take us? And will you inspire us, Lord? Will you breathe on our hearts so that we leap towards what you have for us? So that we're excited about something new, about the adventure that you have, about the growth that you have for us. Some of you may be in the middle of the undiscovered country. And maybe it's not feeling very good right now. It feels like I can't see to the end of this. I can't see how I'm going to get to the next place. I'm just kind of in the middle. Doesn't feel like I've landed. Lord, will you come to those and again just lift them up, speak to them that you have something for them, that you're not done, that you're not going to leave them in this limbo with no future and no past, but that you have a future for them, that you have a good future, and that you're working it out right now. As Holy Spirit, just come, take us to the next place.
You My life is yours. My life is yours. My life is yours. Wherever you go, wherever you go, I will be right there. I will follow. Wherever you